How's it going, Ed? How's it going, Pat?
Hey Nathan, going good. How are you?
I am doing well. Just hanging out, getting a coffee, getting myself situated. Decent day at the old Fiat mine, so no complaints there. How about yourself?
Yeah, that's good. Do you have like a favorite coffee? Sounds
Yeah,
like
the
you
cheap
like
stuff
your
I get from
coffee. So
Costco. Yeah,
oh, fair enough.
I'm.
Yeah,
I gotta treat it like a commodity in the sense that I need to buy it as frugally as possible for the amount that I'm drinking.
I get like a big thing of like Folgers coffee. I'm pretty like, yeah, I can be very modest with my brand of coffee. I don't really care.
Although I don't skip on the cream. I got good dairy farmers nearby, so I get like the best whipping cream to fill this stuff up with.
That's good. Yeah. Hey Jesse.
Hey guys, talking about the important stuff I see.
Oh yeah. While we're all just kind of hanging out too, I'm curious as your guys' thoughts. Were you also just as surprised to see that they named Peter Todd?
Oh yeah, that was interesting to see.
I think I called it yesterday that I thought they were going to just say, well, it could be this guy, or that guy, and we don't know. I was surprised they actually picked someone.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. I was with you. I figured at the end of it, we'd be like, we could make a case for any of these people, but we don't know. We may never know and leave it on some like giant mystery like that. But no, they're like, it's Peter Todd. I was like, really? Seriously? That's who you picked?
Did you guys watch it or did you just the clips that you saw?
No, I watched it.
Yeah, I ended up
Pat,
watching it too because I have.
okay, I'd
Yeah.
only seen the clips. Tell me about it then while we're hanging out.
Pat was hoping it'd be him.
So here was my take on
post.
it. Here's my take on it was. It was a lot of boring stuff. I mean, it's stuff that a lot of us have already heard, dozens of times over. It was a lot of FUD that we've heard before. They went through the whole Blockstream is trying to, control Bitcoin or all that bullshit that we hear, and every other mainstream documentary seems to touch on these talking points from Roger Ver and include them in their documentary. So they went through some of that bullshit. I must say, even though most of the documentary was boring, the ending was kind of interesting. If all you watched was the last 15 minutes or last 10 minutes of the documentary, you might find it interesting. But when I finished watching it, I was like, come on, man, it can't be Peter Todd. And then here's what I was thinking to myself, because a lot of people messaged me because they know I'm into Bitcoin, and they said, so is it this guy Peter Todd? Is it this guy Peter Todd? And this is what I told them. I said, I mean, it's possible there's maybe a 1% chance it's Peter Todd, but I also said I feel like someone's going to come forward and do like a massive debunking of this entire documentary and just prove that it wasn't Peter Todd in like 15 minutes. And I think that's already started to happen. People have already started to come out and say, oh, it's obviously not Peter Todd, here's why. And so, but yeah, you might be rolling your eyes during some of it, and a lot of it is kind of boring. And maybe it's a little bit too long. Most of these documentaries last about an hour and 15 minutes. I think this one was like a full 2 hours, which was a little unexpected. I was not expecting a full 2 hour documentary on this stuff.
Yeah,
I'm kind of curious on that. Just quickly, Pat, unpacking what was the FUD that they were saying about Blockstream, and then additionally too, either you or Ed. What I'm kind of curious about is like, I imagine that for Bitcoiners, it's not going to be great, but will there be any appeal or like curiosity spark, you think, for no coiners that just have HBO and decide to check it out that might push them in the right directions?
I mean, there was a lot of the stuff in the beginning which showed over and over news clips of people declaring Bitcoin dead when it was like 35 cents. Bitcoin was dead at $35. Bitcoin was dead. So there was that stuff, and it showed that the price just kept on growing and growing and growing. So there may be some FOMO sitting in there, but I feel like the FUD was something like, the small blockers won, and they want you to use Bitcoin custodially. They don't want you to use it as cash. And it's like none of the small blockers think that. And that's what the big blockers say about the small blockers. And that was like one of the things that they said was like, oh, they don't want you to use it as cash. They just want you to use it as just any other investment vehicle where you're just investing in it like an ETF. And yeah, that's the big blocker narrative, but that's like completely not what the small blockers want. They just completely just made that up. And but I mean, I guess they had to edit it down for brevity's sake. So it's like every one of these no coiners that does this Bitcoin documentary, they always seem to fall into this big blocker narrative of Bitcoin that, oh, Bitcoin can't be used as cash. The blocks are full. You can't, you can only use 7 transactions. Every single one of them just hits these talking points. And I think that Bitcoiners, at some point, we have to do something to get out there and get the word out that these are not true. It's like you can do more than 7 transactions per second. The blocks are not full. If anything, the blocks are empty and they're filled with garbage and junk, which has nothing to do with transactions. So I'd say there's a better case to make the blocks smaller than it is to make them bigger.
I would agree with that. And even just like jumping off that for a second too, I always find it so frustrating because if you were to change the block size, if you were to increase the block size, that will ultimately just be filled with more crap. Like as soon as there's more space available, it's kind of like the tragedy of the commons, right? If we increase it so that there's vacant spots, then idiots will come along and just for no fee fill those vacant spots, and we're right back to the same problem again, right? There is no just increasing block space. It will always get used up because someone will have some arbitrary data that they want to store there for whatever goddamn reason, and they'll take advantage of low or no fees, right? It's a constantly moving target. And when you change the kind of incentive structure, people will just readapt to the new one, and you're in the same problem again.
And I like what Bitcoin Mechanics said, although this doesn't disprove that Peter Todd is Satoshi. It does make it very unlikely. But Satoshi had 2 main talking points about Bitcoin. One of them was that he thought the blocks should eventually become bigger, and that it would be difficult for the average pleb to run a node. Satoshi thought that the node runners would be big data centers. And the other thing that is Satoshi was worried about spam, and he was in favor of filters. And if you look at those 2 talking points, Peter Todd is disagreeing with both of those. Peter Todd is a small blocker, and he also hates filters. So on those 2 counts, he's 100%, 180 degrees different from Satoshi. Now, that doesn't mean it's, it could have still been Peter Todd. He just changed his mind. That's also possible. But yeah, Peter Todd is not Satoshi, or God, I hope he's not Satoshi.
I would kind of take the other side of that and be like, in the event, I don't believe this, but in the event that he actually was like, oh, that's perfect because no one will ever accept this and he'll have no overbearing. Like it'd almost be worse if we had somebody who was kind of like a messiah figure come out, because then not everybody, but a lot of people would then still want to like jump back in and follow him and put extra credence on his ideas or what his words are. It's like, yeah, it would almost be better that it was someone we completely disregard. Like, great.
Yeah, we could. We can disregard Peter Todd because he wanted to add a tail emission, so we can pretty much disregard anything else he says.
Yeah, that was kind of that was the big one for me as well too. Jesse, your thoughts?
I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, so but in terms of who's Satoshi, I am most certainly not equipped to opine on that.
I think that the documentary as a whole, compared to other Bitcoin documentaries, definitely wasn't the worst I've seen. But I think the biggest disservice was half of it was just completely centered around like the who is Satoshi and the investigation aspect. Kind of was like a mystery like adventure they kind of made it out to be, and it's like we don't need that. It's really not helpful to anybody. You're not going to figure out who it is. Like I just felt that was the biggest turnoff for me as like someone that's a Bitcoiner. And my impression of the guy that like did the documentary was that he definitely knows about Bitcoin because a lot of the stuff he talked about like was accurate historically speaking, but there were definitely biases like Patrick was saying. And I think they did a big disservice as well to not mention like when they mentioned the block size words, for instance, not to bring up lightning, and stuff like that, and just kind of like appeal to that whole all the small blockers won, and he was trying really hard to not sound biased, but you could tell, and I think that's only going to be apparent to someone like us that knows a lot of the nuances to the debates in the Bitcoin space, and not so much to people that are coming in. So, like, my opinion would be, if somebody has Max and wants to watch it, I would say okay, but like it's really like I wouldn't take that as like you're going to be educated on Bitcoin by watching this documentary. And unfortunately, I think we need that. I think we need like a good like mainstream documentary that's like well produced, that is just informative about Bitcoin and isn't biased. But like I said, like it's not the worst one. I've definitely seen worse ones where all they talk about is the price and they're talking about all the other cryptocurrencies. This one didn't have that so much. It was a little different, but yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it to someone.
I like the proof of cringe remark by Adam Back when he was talking about Ethereum.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I saw that clip. That man, you see those videos of Vitalik, and like, do people who are into ETH just never see these things, or they're just like, it's fine, this is fine?
Cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, guys. Like, you know,
It's the young founder myth. It's like we had, Steve Jobs, and we had let's see, Mark Zuckerberg, and now everyone's looking for the next, young 20-year-old, dorky guy that has this $1 billion idea, and that's what Vitalik fed into. And this is the reason why Elizabeth Holmes was able to get away with it for as long as she did. She fell right into that archetype. And it's a myth because most successful companies are founded by mature people, not by, some young kid who doesn't know anything about anything and who has this idea in their head, doesn't know how anything works. And, they all of a sudden, those are the exceptions rather than the rules. In fact, Steve Jobs himself had to be kicked out of his own company because he was destroying his own company. And he didn't really make Apple a success until he came back, much, much later on in his life. But people forget that part. They just remember that, this, 20-year-old kid, Steve Jobs, started Apple and it became this huge success. And so I don't know. I guess it's worth a watch. Just to kind of even just to laugh. And one of the things I was really I kind of knew this before I saw the documentary, but it kind of proved it when I was watching the documentary. When I was watching the trailer for the documentary, the trailer, which is like 3 minutes long, was like, I was like, oh, they're completely taking every single thing in this trailer out of context. Like they're trying to make it seem like Adam Back is Satoshi in the trailer. And I was like, I know that they're clipping these things out of context. One of the things that I saw in the trailer that I thought was very sneaky, and in the movie they actually they had more context to it, but in the trailer it showed Adam Back saying, they said, who do you think Satoshi is, blah blah blah, and Adam Back kind of nervously looked around and he was like, well, I have to be careful what I say, and then that was the clip in the trailer to make it seem like Adam Back was worried that people would find out he was Satoshi. In the actual movie he says, yeah, I have to be careful what I say, and they're like, why is that? He's like, well, because I don't want to be sued by Craig Wright. He's been suing everybody, so it's like, yeah, that clip in the trailer was completely taken out of context, and I knew it was before I even watched the movie. I knew it was going to be something like that.
Yeah, it's funny.
There's a lot of that.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I was just saying there was a lot of that, and it was I think Adam or Samson, because both of them were in the documentary. Like I saw them make a tweet today saying that there was probably 100 times more footage than what actually made it. Like they were filming constantly, and that just didn't get put in. And you could assume, like, all right, that's going to happen with most documentaries because you can't, have a 10-hour documentary. But I'm just based off of what did make it to the final cut. It's like obviously it was meant to just, like Patrick said, just paint things in a certain light.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It's like HBO's giving the people what they want, right? They want something controversial and triggering, and that'll like set up, get people talking. And so identifying, a Satoshi candidate and
it's working right now.
Going against the Bitcoin maxi grade, like that's a way to ruffle feathers and get people talking about the documentary. They're trying to drum up views, right? Like that seems like a pretty, straightforward way to do that, is to not, just be straightforward and honest, because that might be too boring for their audience or something.
Agreed. And, talking about the idea of kind of moving adoption forward in these things too, I don't think it's ever, there have been some in history. If we look back at like, what the fuck was Al Gore's movie? The one, everyone's going to die and then nothing came true and the polar bears are still fine.
Yeah. The hockey stick. Whatever.
Inconvenient truth. And there was like even like bowling for Columbine and this stuff as well too. So occasionally like a document can hit a nerve and kind of get that cultural movement around it, or at least to get a kind of a buzz and attention. But we're probably not too far off from the time when continued Bitcoin adoption will be the result of art. And I don't mean necessarily like even the stuff like Madax and those guys are doing, but I imagine that getting normies on board will not come from documentaries, but stories that include Bitcoin. That it'll make its way into the kind of narratives and characters that I align with. And it'll be the world of fiction. It's maybe even just having it tangentially as a tool that starts to kind of pique their curiosity, or it somehow aligns with how they identify with how they identify for themselves. And that those fictional stories will have way more impact than even on just broader adoption than tutorials and documentaries. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, it's like you're planting breadcrumbs, right? It's like when you see, I forget what show it was where like Bitcoin was mentioned for the first time on TV, 10 years ago. It's like they just mention it on the show. And then people are like, oh, what's that? Is that some creepy internet currency? Like, I don't understand. Just planting those breadcrumbs all throughout, like you said, the art world, whether it's fiction or whatever, piques interest, right? And obviously, the bigger Bitcoin gets, I think the more we're going to see that.
Yeah, it was an episode of The Good Wife in 2012, and the name of the episode was Bitcoin for Dummies, and which is very early. 2012 is very early for a mainstream TV show mention of it. I mean, in 2013 and 14 you saw more of it, but 2012 was really early. And apparently, I haven't seen the episode, but people who have say like Bitcoin barely even gets mentioned in the entire episode. Like it's not the entire episode isn't really about Bitcoin. It's just mentioned, I guess, briefly a couple of times.
Well, even on like that same sort of tangent, we're starting to see Bitcoin books coming into the space too, right? It just would make sense that at some point, maybe if any of those are quite successful, you would see it then evolve into either like a television series or a movie as well too. Like I think we will see, because particularly as price continues to appreciate over the years, like if you're going to do a spy thriller or like a big heist movie, well, they're not going for gold bars anymore, right? There's other shit that they got to get to. And from a more modern, more tech focused audience, that could be really interesting in terms of like the, yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say, are you guys familiar with 21 Futures?
I have not gone through it, but I am familiar with it. Can you give the audience a bit of a breakdown?
So like Consensus, is it Consensus Network? They're like a publishing house out of Europe. They put out a call a couple years ago or a year and a half ago for just people to submit short stories sort of about Bitcoin, like fictional short stories about Bitcoin or involving Bitcoin. And then they put together a book of 21 short stories. And so just to what you're talking about, it'd be cool to see, maybe one of those stories could get picked up and expanded upon and made into like a little, whether it's a cartoon or someone makes a dark comic out of it or whatever it's going to be. Like, it'll keep happening. What you're talking about with just fiction and art, like it'll just keep happening. And 21 Futures is just an example of it. So I'm just pointing that out for anyone that's interested in sort of exploring that.
Well, even you just reminded me too that so we've got Tuttle Twins coming to hang out with us on Friday, but they're putting out, I think I saw it was in 8 days coming out with the Return to the Bitcoin Verse, right? And I imagine those cartoons are actually going to have a decent impact on adoption, right? Particularly for younger generation, young parents who are maybe value line that want to show that stuff. But I think it's those forms of entertainment that it's almost like you're just treating like Bitcoin like it exists. Like you're not trying to explain it or justify it or argue for it in the same way that you would, if a character in one of Gary's fancy movies uses a credit card, not really giving a breakdown of the credit card system to the audience. They're just using it and just normalizing it. Ed, I'm curious your thoughts.
I haven't seen that one in particular, but and I am looking forward to seeing the Tuttle Twin stuff. I didn't watch. Did that whole thing come out? I saw that Ben.
Yeah, so we got
I didn't watch that yet.
We got the not the whole episode. So the whole episode drops in 8 days. I forget what that is. I'm not doing math publicly. So the whole episode is coming out in about a week. I think October 17th. And then there was a previous Bitcoin episode that was awesome as well too. And I'm not necessarily sure how, but there was a clip that included a nice musical number that included Ben and I think Natalie Brunell and Corey Clipston and Max Kaiser. And there was someone else too. I'm trying to remember who else was in that little setup. But there was a nice musical number that Ben actually lent his voice to for the character as well too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't even seen the clip yet, but I'll probably watch it when the whole thing comes out. But on that topic though, I do like the what is it? It's like a short story comic book called the Time Chain Codex. I think we talked about it at one point. And it's all like AI generated art by this guy called Fractal Encrypt. He's really excellent. I mean, he's done other Bitcoin artwork, and it just this one was more of like a sci-fi take based off of an article called Bitcoin Astronomy, and I find that as like it's a really interesting like piece of fiction, but that ties into the whole the Bitcoin ideas and like expanding on them and like how humans will interact with Bitcoin and what will the future look like with Bitcoin as money, and all these things like Jesse was saying, the 21 futures, like all these things are very interesting to think about. I always like love seeing that. I think that that could be a very viable form of Bitcoin education, is just like the fiction aspect, just like having it be incorporated in like fictional works, like TV shows, movies, books, all that kind of stuff.
Well, even on that note too, because you brought up an interesting point, and just a reminder to everybody hanging out here, if you want to come up and just riff with us, if you have a question about Bitcoin, anything we're talking about, a technical question, we're here to help and answer all those. If you don't want to participate, don't have to. We'll just keep kind of riffing back and forth. It's interesting that you brought up the fact that it was AI generated art, because I really like that idea. Because even I've got friends that kind of work in media and these things too, and some of them are just brilliant and interesting people. But of course, getting the capital that they would need to create something and to get those connections and to get involved in distribution, it's not really doable. But as this technology continues to improve and get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, you're gonna have like the most amazing storytellers be able to put together a full-length film, essentially from AI generated art, images, and video, and even voiceover as well too, that we might kind of get like, our culture kind of sucks. If you look at mainstream corporate radio, I can't fucking stand it. It's so patronizing and I hate the banter. If you look at just corporate TV and corporate media, it's all crap. It's all overly sterilized. It's purposely only trying to target a broad audience. You're getting the writers injecting their message into basically everything, and it becomes either just junk food of entertainment or preaching some message for gratification amongst their peers. But if the barrier to entry on this stuff comes down, we could have just a complete new renaissance in terms of movies and TV shows, kind of like, the podcast revolution. And I would imagine too that that'd be great for spreading the Bitcoin information and getting those involved as well too, because you have many people in the space that are brilliant producers, and they would finally have the means to do something almost entirely on their own. Motorist, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't really watch mainstream TV that much, but recently we installed an antenna in our house specifically for watching football. So we end up watching local news, which we haven't watched in a long time. And I'm like, dude, this is just crap. They're just promoting whatever the local businesses want to promote and whatever their advertisers are looking to promote. It's just and it just seems like they're not even trying anymore. I mean, it used to be. I mean, I guess the local news got criticized for sensationalizing things, but it used to be that they used to try to at least make stuff interesting. But now it's just this boring drivel, and they're not even trying to even sound interesting. And they're just putting forward like this narrative, and it's like whatever they're talking about, one of the big geopolitical issues, like if they're talking about the war in Gaza or the war in Ukraine, it's just mainstream talking points with no questioning of the mainstream narrative. I mean, it is what it's called programming for a reason. They're just trying to program you. And this is one of the reasons why. I love YouTube. I mean, of course, YouTube gets criticized. I guess you could put Rumble in this category too, but you can find whatever weird niche thing that you're interested in, and you can watch 100 videos on it. Not to say that you're necessarily going to be better informed, but at least they're going to be talking about something that you're interested in hearing. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of misinformation online as well, and you can be certainly propagandized and misled by independent sources as well. And I think it's important to be aware of those biases. But I really do like this fracturization of media. I'm very much in favor of that. And anytime I go back to legacy media, I just have to roll my eyes at how bad it is after I'm used to all the wonderful variety I get from alternative media.
It's so terrible. And it speaks back to something that Matt Hill said a while ago that still really, really resonates with me, that I'm trying to like pull apart and figure out how it better fits into the framework. But not even this idea of decentralization, but this idea of disintermediation. Because essentially, like with podcasting and these things too, it would mean that there's no middleman in terms of content created for other forms of art and media as well. and just kind of how powerful that is, which I have another comment I want to come to. But before, Jesse, I was just curious your thoughts on this and this kind of, where media and culture might go as a result.
I mean, honestly, I think you guys have covered a lot of really good ground here. So there's probably not a ton I can add. You're definitely, I think everyone's pretty well aware that, we've seen the mainstream media really, fall on their own sword, and they can't even admit they're bleeding. But they've fallen on their own sword. They're just sensationalizing or following some agenda, and it's boring, and no one's interested, and no one believes it anymore. Independent media is obviously coming up behind it. How it's going to be, as you're saying, disintermediated. How do you find trusted sources? What will sort of end up happening is now the individual, like the onus now falls on the individual to say, okay, who has credibility and who doesn't? And you're going to have to figure it out for yourself, because there's no one there to hold your hand quite as much anymore as maybe before. If when media was more trusted, not to say they were fully trustworthy, but they were at least seemingly more honest. Okay, you had this degree of, faith and trust in them that we can rely to get some kind of information from them. Now you're on your own. And that's probably a good thing at the end of the day, because now everyone's going to have to take up that personal responsibility mantle that we all should have for a very long time. But we were too lazy and disincentivized perhaps to do so. Now the incentive is there. It's going to change the dynamic of things. Obviously, we're in the midst of that playing out. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it's fascinating to watch. Everyone has to become sort of their own detective and figure out what's right and what's not, or what's accurate, I should say, and what's not. And yeah, we'll see where it goes, but it'll take place in media, it'll take place in art. Yeah, we got it all.
No, it's a very good point too. The idea that, and I think this is something that has been lost, and I know it's come up in conversations, I think, with you guys and other people before too, but how important at that point in time will be reputation, right? Like how important your reputation will matter. And that'll be one of the most important assets that you hold.
Yeah, it's funny. Think about economists on TV, right? I remember, I started my career just before the global financial crisis, and guys could just go on TV. And I mean, it's obviously still the case today, but you can go on TV and go, oh, yeah, real estate's a great asset and the banks are safe and sound. And then it all crashes. But those same guys are still going to be invited back on TV. And what they said that they got totally wrong, no one's going to bring it up and question them on it. They're just going to move forward. I think with independent media, if you don't have a good, solid reputation, people just aren't going to take you seriously. And so, like, I'm looking forward, in effect, to seeing the rise of, I don't know what you would call it, reputational. I don't know. Well, we'll have to invent a new term at some point for it, but the credibility factor will kick in.
Yeah.
Right.
Ratings are no longer an important currency for these large media. They used to actually care about ratings. They used to care about their audience. Now ratings are just an afterthought, because they're more concerned about their advertisers, and their advertisers don't care about ratings. Their advertisers just want them to stay on message, stay on the mainstream message that is not threatening to the advertisers. And I'm a free market guy, and I'm all in favor of advertising. But one of the things is with these pharmaceutical ads that you see. So in the United States, pharmaceutical ads were deregulated, so to speak. I think in the 90s, it used to be that pharmaceutical drugs were not allowed to advertise. And what they would do, the way they would get around this rule is they would have an advertisement, but they would never say what the product was for. So you were watching this ad, and you like at the end of that, you're like, huh, what the hell was that for? Like these old Rogaine ads that you would see, like in the early 90s, they would never say what Rogaine was for. They would just show a guy talking about Rogaine, and there was, he had a full head of hair, and then there was like a picture in the background where he had thinning hair, and you had to kind of make the connection on your own that Rogaine is for hair growth. They said, so talk to your doctor to see if Rogaine is right for you. It's like, well, what is it for? No one knew. So it was kind of a joke. And then later on, they kind of said, okay, you can say what the drug is for, but you have to also list all the side effects. So now when they have these pharmaceutical ads on TV, then, the last, 10 seconds of the ad is just someone reading really, really fast all the side effects for the ad. And it was funny because what that did is it didn't convince people to go out and buy pharmaceutical drugs. That's not what the point of the ads were. The point of the ads was to get the pharmaceutical companies into the TV stations' newsrooms, get them access to the mainstream media to make sure that they're not running any type of ads, or not ads, but they're not running any type of media stories where it makes them look bad. And that was the point, because they don't need advertising to get people to take our pharmaceutical drugs. The people will take what the doctors just prescribe, usually without question. And so they didn't need those advertisements to convince people to buy those drugs. They needed the access to the TV stations, and that's where they stopped caring about. They don't care about ratings; they care about money. And you don't need ratings if you're having all these companies coming in and paying you to stay on message. And that's just the insanity of it. And this is why no one cares, or their ratings are tanking. Like, somebody on YouTube can get way more views than MSNBC or something like that. But MSNBC makes more money because they got all the big advertisers.
Well, even on that note too, right? My understanding is that from the pharmaceutical side of things, the goal isn't to sell the product. The goal is to sell the disease, right? To convince you that it's something that you might have and that you need to go and talk with your doctor about in the first place. Like, the incentives are all it's just god awful. Ed, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that take too. And Patrick, that's funny. I didn't realize that whole like train of events of like the process that they went through between not being able to say what it's for and then having to change it to say like all the side effects. But I've always found the list of side effects at the end of the commercials to be what's the right way of saying it? It's like hilarious in like
fucking
a really
hilarious.
in,
Like,
in
yeah,
a
we'll
really
help you with your
depressing way.
broken knee.
Yeah, it's like that. Like all the terrible side effects that like I wouldn't wish on somebody just to fix like one issue that arguably, like you were saying, like is probably just treating a symptom rather than getting to the cause of the problem, and can be fixed by something maybe holistic or just a change of lifestyle. It could be something very, simple
Oh,
that they just completely overlook it because it doesn't make them money. I mean, that's really at the root of a lot of these things.
it's just ridiculous, and it's funny too, because there's people around me that I see having very severe health problems. They're constantly at the doctors or even the ER room and these things too. And I feel for them, but it's blatantly apparent that at least a compounding factor is just lifestyle. Again, it goes back to corruption, and money is corruption and everything. Not only the healthcare system, but the food supply and everything else associated with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And like the culture is just very like averse to accountability. Like, we don't like to be accountable for anything, and we like to point to big corporations or politicians and make someone else to blame for what is causing the problems in your life. And I think that even in the Bitcoin space, I think there could be a little too much of that, like victimization, where you like the Federal Reserve is like the root cause of all the problems in the world. And it's like, all right, I mean, they're definitely like a bad actor, but like there are definitely things in your life that you can change within the system that you can do ethically and improve your life. And it always helps to first ask yourself, like, is this something that I can fix? Is there something that I can do about the problem that is currently facing me, as opposed to blaming somebody else for it?
I completely agree. Before I kind of pivot and change topics a little bit, just remind to the audience too, if anybody wants to come up or ask a Bitcoin question or just jump into the little roundtable with us, we'd love to have you here. Pat or Jesse, did you have anything else on that topic that you want to add?
Yeah, I don't remember who it was that said they sell the disease. I'm reminded of that ad for restless leg disease. I'm like, is that a real thing? Are they just trying to sell some bullshit medicine for restless leg disease? Is that a real thing? I don't really know. And then one of the side effects was the urge to gamble. I'm like, oh my God, so you're taking a drug that's going to make you want to go to the casino and blow your money? I don't know. I think this is all made up. I don't know. I'm doubting that one. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is garbage for sure.
Even on that note too, Viagra was originally I think it's opening up like heart vessels, but Viagra was a heart medication that had a funny side effect. And so erectile dysfunction didn't pop up as a condition until after Viagra was already made and patented.
It's funny. If I'm not mistaken, I could swear I read somewhere that Ozempic was the same thing. It's actually not meant for weight loss. It was developed for something else. And then they had to pivot it. And this happens with tons and tons of drugs. Like unfortunately, over the last few years, ended up reading a lot more about the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry than I would have liked to. But like drugs that basically don't work for their like initial plan, the pharmaceuticals will just pivot it and say, okay, can we apply this elsewhere, even though it wasn't really meant for it, doesn't work. If they can just prove, and the hurdle for quote proving is very low these days. If they can just prove, and they'll design studies and fund the studies that jump this low hurdle, that it'll help with this, that, or the other. Even if it's like, they will just market the shit out of it because they know people aren't even going to take it on their own. That's also part of why they market drugs. Like if you see a drug on TV, chances are it was either developed for something else or it's just not like the market. Like people just don't like it and they're not using it. So they need to drum up interest in it. And that's why they market it so heavily, is because they're trying to recoup their money on it. And so they're like doubling down on a failed drug and hoping to get something back on it.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because even just like reflecting on it, it's like, I've never seen an advertisement for antibiotics. That is just not something that needs a marketing play.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. Just pivoting for a second too, we were talking about disintermediation, decentralizing earlier. It only recently dropped? Did any of you guys see the recent investors podcast, Press and Pitch, with Bitcoin Mechanic and Jason Hughes?
Yes, I did listen to that.
I thought it was awesome. And actually, I'm curious, Pat, if you were familiar with Jason before that episode, because I actually wasn't. That was my first introduction to him.
Which Jason was it? Jason who?
Jason Hughes. So he's over at Ocean. I believe he's the one, at least, that was spearheading Datum and that creation as well too. But hearing his backstory and the little tale with Tesla there, I thought was super interesting.
Yeah, I haven't seen that podcast yet, but I want to watch that. And I also want to watch the actual Datum announcement that they made. I have it saved on my YouTube, but I haven't actually watched that one yet. But I'm curious to hear. I think it was Ed said that he saw it. I'm curious to hear what he has to say about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely recommend everybody go listen to it if you're listening to this. Very good explanation just of mining overall, and like some of the centralizing and decentralizing components that are present at the moment. But the thing that Nathan's referring to that Jason had done with the Teslas was actually pretty insane. He bought, I think he said he bought a Model S or a Tesla and was trying to just tinker with it himself just for fun. And he enrolled himself in like their bug bounty program. He was like just learning it. He would give them some feedback on things he found. And he eventually found out that he could, through a series and chain of bugs, gain access to any Tesla in the world and essentially go into a terminal on his computer, get the VIN number of said Tesla, and then have it drive. Like, so what he did was he called someone at Tesla and said, "Are you near Tesla right now?" They gave him the VIN. And he said, "All right, stand back, like make sure you're like 10 feet away from the Tesla." And he had it drive forward. And then he's like, "All right, we need to make a call." They go to Elon Musk. And then apparently he has a conversation with Elon Musk. So he's like on, conversation basis with him. And very, very interesting. I mean, to think like you're just tinkering around and you find something like that, it's pretty incredible. But
hey, I mean, maybe not everything needs to be connected to the internet. One of the biggest scams is the Internet of Things, and I know Tesla kind of. I mean, I guess there's reasons for a car to be connected to the internet, but I mean, I remember there was a guy. I don't know if some of you guys may have heard of him, called Brian Sovereign. I don't know if he's still around, but he had a tech podcast that I used to listen to, and Brian Sovereign did every episode he did like a bit on Internet of Things, and he called it Internet of Targets, and he was talking about how all these horrific things, that all these devices that are connected to the internet, and they have no way of updating their firmware, and they have no way of updating their security patches the same way, say, a regular computer would, where they become vulnerable. So somebody can remotely access all your appliances in your house and turn them on. It's like, no, I am not going to buy a refrigerator that connects to the internet. I don't need my refrigerator to connect to the internet. If I want to have, some technical features on it, that's fine, but it does not need to be accessed remotely. And thankfully, this Internet of Things trend has somewhat paused. Although I don't think it's completely gone away. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you should not be able to remotely access someone's car. I mean, this is very horrific, because you're not going to be able to keep that secure. There's always going to be some hacker that is going to be able to find a backdoor in one way or another, and it's probably not going to be that hard.
Right. I think like in this. Sorry, Jesse, you can go ahead.
All I was going to say, maybe that's a good plug for mentioning that. Like, you can generate your own Bitcoin keys offline with a cold card, and if you don't, you probably should.
Yes. Yeah, and like I think the engineering ethos in Bitcoin is especially for people that kind of like follow it very regularly, is like, don't fix something that isn't broken, don't add moving parts to this thing, it's working. I think someone used the analogy of we're like trying to like applying a Bitcoin update is like fixing an airplane while it's in the air flying, right? We have to be very careful with what we're doing here. We don't want to make any jarring changes, and if we add some kind of feature to it, limit what it can interact with within the system, because you don't want it, like for in this example, does the Tesla connecting to the internet, should there be a pathway from it connecting to the internet to the motor itself moving? Like I don't think that's completely necessary, but there's somewhere within the code or the firmware, whatever layer it's on in the computers, that it is possible, and that's a little concerning. I mean, if it is connected to the internet, it should only be for what is absolutely necessary for it to be connected to the internet. And I think that, like Patrick was saying with the Internet of Things stuff, it's like we just kind of fell into this. Well, we can do it, so we should, instead of should we do it at being the first thing, and that kind of we sacrifice a lot of privacy. I mean, people set up like uh, surveillance cameras that are completely connected to like Amazon, like a Ring camera is connected to Amazon servers, and you're just giving them complete 24/7 surveillance to your property. We're sacrificing privacy, we're sacrificing security just for like this little bit of convenience, and then it just, I think it's become kind of apparent that like after all these hacks have happened, is it really worth it? Like, are we actually benefiting from this little gain in convenience here?
I almost now imagine like a Tesla coming out and having it be like a cold card where I buy my car and it's got like the cut here, shoot here labeled all over it. If I want to disconnect it from the internet or get rid of like autonomous driving, you can just destroy this element of it and keep going. And it's funny to think if some of these kind of Bitcoin ethos on security and having the ability to even like disconnect these sort of things and do it offline, if that will evolve into other industries as well too. We'll see better security practices as the kind of Bitcoin culture and adoption grows, just permeate elsewhere. Pat, what were you going to say?
Yeah, sorry, I was just feeding the pups. So yeah, I think that there, when your entertainment system is connected to the internet on your car, that should be like completely walled off, and there shouldn't be any physical connection from, say, that apparatus to the motor. Now, maybe there might be a reason for the motor to be connected to the internet, but someone shouldn't be able to get access to the motor from, say, the entertainment system. I think that the security around, say, the internet connected to the motor should be should be much higher, kind of like how financial security is, than say if someone hacks your radio or something in your car. That's not a big deal, but if they hack the motor, that's a much bigger deal. So my concern is like if the entire system of the car is operating on one system, then someone can find the weakest point of the car and hack into the more sensitive parts of the car. Now there's a guy, some of you guys may know, Louis Rossman, who talks about a lot of this stuff. And he says he's okay with sharing his data with companies that he has a relationship with. It's like, okay, so if I'm a Tesla fanboy, let's say I'm not, but let's say I was, and I love Tesla and my entire, life is Tesla. Okay. I'm okay with sharing all my data with Tesla because I have a close relationship with this company. But then, I don't want to say I buy a blender, by some company I've never heard of. I don't necessarily want to sign away all my data to this to this blender company so they can spy inside my house to see what kind of, fruits and vegetables I'm blending in their little smoothie blender. So it's like, just because you're okay with sharing your data with one or two companies that you do a lot of business with, that doesn't necessarily mean you have no right to privacy with any company whatsoever, even if you have a small business relationship with them. And I think as consumers, we have to be kind of responsible with, what type of companies we get in bed with. It's like, okay, I understand Google is going to read my Gmail. So yeah, I mean, we've kind of crossed that bridge a long time ago, and they're going to be able to see every video I've watched on YouTube. Yeah, I get that. But then that doesn't mean every other company should have the right to that information.
It's funny now because I'm just thinking about like potential threat vectors. Like if the government's trying to crack down or weaken Bitcoiners, which appliances am I not considering as a possible attack? First one that comes to mind is deep freeze, right? All the Bitcoiners powered by ribeye and beef, just go after them by having their deep freezes remotely disconnect and turn off. It's ridiculous the things that are connected these days and age.
Coffee grinder,
you have
automatic
to buy
coffee machine.
Yeah, I even bought a like Casio brand digital watch and like tossed my Apple Watch because I was like, I don't really need this. I don't need it.
Well, hell yeah!
Everything I'm doing.
I got a G-Shock. I got 2 G-Shocks, and I'm going to get a third one.
That's
too.
what I have. Yeah,
I'm rocking mine right now.
It's so funny. I love that because Bitcoiners get it, but it's funny because like I get like attention from random people every once in a while. Like people I know, they'll be like, "What? Why are you wearing that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's my watch. I don't have to charge it every night. Like that isn't that enough of a reason to wear this?" I mean, but yeah, that's a good point. All the different things. I mean, it is crazy to me that like washing machines and refrigerators are smart devices now. I just can't understand why someone would need that whatever level of convenience that's going to add to them, and not it wouldn't even cross their mind that like maybe I shouldn't have something that can be remotely turned off if a hacker got even just a hacker like a bad person, right?
Don't you want to see your text messages every time you open up your refrigerator? You want to see your text messages just pop up?
How are you gonna know the new Bitcoin documentary on HBO Max came out if you're not checking your refrigerator door, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. And even quick side note, Pat, because I thought this is interesting little like comment they kind of threw away during the Press and Fish episode with Jason and Bitcoin Mechanic there too. But apparently, Luke getting unbanned on Twitter was a direct result of Jason's conversation with Elon. That essentially him finding this bug and then talking to him, he made the request that you got to unban Luke.
Wow, I can't imagine the timeline where Luke doesn't get back on Twitter. That sounds horrific. So I'm so glad he was able to get back. For some reason, I thought Jack somehow talked to Elon, Jack Dorsey, and got it done. But yeah, that makes sense if it was Jason that did it.
That would make sense to me. We're coming up near the top of the hour too. If anybody does want to jump up here and hang out with us, or you got any questions, please do. And just note, team, I got a meeting at 2, so I'll have to jump off just a minute or two beforehand. But for Ed and for Pat, I'm kind of actually just curious. It's completely off topic, but again, we're just hanging out. What things are looking like down in Florida right now? If you guys have heard anything about kind of the hurricane situation and what's happening there, because from all the way up here in Canada, I know there's a lot of people's lives affected, but even I'm noticing it. A lot of some of the products that I need for my fiat job, I can't get anymore because I think the manufacturing and distribution is down that area and it's all shut down. So I was just curious if you guys had any updates on that.
So I'm up in New Hampshire, and I don't know. I know like a couple people personally that are down there, and are more inland, and they're just going to try to weather it. I don't know if that would be me if I was in that situation. And just based off of the news I've heard, it looks, my prayers are out to those people. I really feel like it's going to be rough, and hopefully it isn't, because there's always going to be people that think that they're going to be able to make it through these things. And especially if you're near the water, I mean, from what I've seen so far, it looks like it's going to be pretty bad. So I can't speak to much more than that, but yeah.
Well, yeah, thankfully, California, even though we have earthquakes and we have, wildfires and mudslides, hurricanes aren't a thing here. But I was hanging out on Clubhouse yesterday, and Fish Bernoulli and Dusty Diamond, they were talking about, their preparations. I don't even know if Fish is in Florida right now. I know Dusty is, but he's in hurricane mode. And I think Fish was saying that he, as long as you're like more than 5 miles inland, you're you're pretty much safe because you're not going to get hit with the storm surge if you're more than 5 miles inland, and usually the weather starts to lose power once it makes landfall. So hopefully people are getting to safety before that hurricane hits. I know that I'm running a survivor pool, so I was checking the path of the hurricane to see if it was going to affect any NFL games, believe it or not, and it's not, because the Dolphins are on bye this weekend and Tampa Bay is playing on the road. So those teams are not affected. I was just trying to make sure that if one of those games got canceled, I had to let my people know not to pick one of their games for their pool picks.
Hey, motorist or Patrick, penny for your thoughts on Joe Mixon. He's on my squad. He's having this high ankle injury. He's killing me.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, let me tell you, I got Rashee Rice on my team, and man, I drafted him, I think, third or something, and I'm so pissed that he's out for the season. And yeah, my quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, he's my quarterback on my team too. He ran into him for no reason and injured him. So I'm pretty cursed right now. Although I'm still doing okay. I'm in 4th place in my league, and I'll probably move up to 3rd place. And yeah, the league that I'm in, we take things seriously. This is unrelated to the Survivor pool, but yeah, we take things seriously because when I was first contacted to join this league, it's $225 per person to join this league, and I'm like, man, he's like, I don't know, you guys are sharks, so in that league, I don't want to play with you guys, and I got called every single name and got bullied into joining this league. I got called the P word, I got called the F word, and not F you, the other F word, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll play with you guys, and so far they've been taking my money, but maybe this year I'm going to turn things around.
Right on. Yeah, I took the bait on an invite from a friend of mine this year. It was $100 pool. I've never been a football fan. And suddenly this year, I know every player on every team, who's hot, who's not. It's amazing how you just get sucked into the vortex of it when just like, it's not a ton of money on the line or anything, but like, hey, I'd like to win. I'm actually doing all right now. I'm tied for first. I'm on a 4-way tie at 4-1 for first. But just on dumb luck, I showed up to the draft, and by the 3rd round, I'm like, hey, should I take this guy? And they're like, what? Like, did you not study anything? I was like, nah, I didn't read anything. I'm just making it up as I go.
If I was in a casual league, I would be in 1st place. But every single person that's in this league with me is a hardcore NFL fan. And so I knew that this was a shark league. This is not a league that you can just coast through. So yeah, so this is why, I'm struggling in this league every single year. But like if I was in, like, say, a casual league with my mom and my sister, I would be in 1st place like for like the whole season.
Yeah. Yeah. This is maybe somewhere in between. These guys, they seem to know what they're doing. Anyway, it's total, subject change there. But
I understood some of those words, not all
Yeah.
of them, but I knew some of those words, right? I will one day maybe participate with you there, Pat, as well too. And
I'll
just
tell
a
you,
quick,
Nathan, man, you can
Yeah.
learn real fast. Like you pick it up real. I'm telling you now from experiences this last month, you pick it up real fast.
Well, it's funny too, because even on that note, my understanding of like modern finance and economics, like what the talking heads on CNBC and stuff are rambling about, that it was diving down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and then trying to better understand the money. It's like once you're interested and it's important to you, man, can you grind through some of that stuff? Like a completely different experience than my time in university and high school, right? As soon as it's like, okay, I'm genuinely interested for my own sake, yeah, you can pull a lot of information quick. The one thing I was just going to mention before popping off here as well too, which I think is a good point, is just with the situation in with the hurricane, was it Helena, and then the other one we have now too. It's a good reminder too for anybody that's got their funds secured. If you haven't considered something other than paper for protecting your seed words, you never really know what Mother Nature might throw at you. And it's a good thing to maybe want to have on hand before there's an accident that costs you a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah, very. I agree with that. I think that even without that consideration, it's good to just the fires happen. That it's just great to have something more than paper. It'll degrade over time too. That's the other thing. It's just not meant to last long periods of time. And also to that point, I think that it applies to Bitcoin too. As far as you put a little bit of money into Bitcoin, you invest into Bitcoin, however you want to say it, and you suddenly become motivated to learn more about it, and you can surprise yourself at how fast you learn everything. So I mean, I don't know much about football, but I I think anytime that you get involved in something and you start learning it, it's always fun to go down different rabbit holes and different pathways of knowledge. Have you guys seen any? I did want to just leave a quick note for everybody listening, as well as you guys up here. But I'm wondering if either of you guys have played with the Bitcoin Keeper wallet. It's a mobile Bitcoin wallet. And if you had any thoughts on it, I have used it the last couple of days. I've been trying to test like everything I've kind of done with Sparrow or Nunchuck. I've been playing around with on that one, and I find it's actually a really great wallet. I think a lot of people just don't even know about it yet, but should definitely keep it on their radar and check it out.
Yeah, I'd be curious for your review. I haven't had a chance to download it yet, but I saw Ben BTC Sessions tweet about it a couple days ago. So I'd definitely be curious for your thoughts if you're already playing with it.
Yeah, so far I have not signed any multi-sig transactions, but I've put together similar to Nunchuck or Sparrow. You can add keys and then you add them into a wallet, and you can construct the wallet out of those keys however you like. You can make them single sig wallets. You can combine 3 of your keys into a 2 out of 3 multi-sig. I haven't signed anything with them yet, but I've done like health checks with cold cards. I've used the tap signer. They all work, and I find that um, comparably to Nunchuck, it's smooth. There's no like bugs. Like it just works. And like I was kind of surprised by that because, like I said, I heard about it maybe a month or two ago. I checked it out briefly. I ran a software wallet on it, so a hot wallet on my phone, and then kind of forgot about it until I picked it up a few days ago. And I was just genuinely impressed by the feature set it had. It actually had a couple things that Nunchuck was missing as far as in-app like Tor support. So you could just go right in the app and connect to Tor through the app and not rely on a separate Tor app like Orbot that you might need to run on your phone. And that was just an interesting thing to me. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where they go with developing the app.
It's just so good to hear. I really like how I'm so bullish on multi-sig becoming more and more user-friendly as time goes on, because it used to be that multi-sig was kind of an afterthought, but it seems like there's a lot of user interface and wallets, emerging that are just making multi-sig a lot more easier to use for most people, which is I think great. And regarding I have a wallet where not half, but like some of the funds are in liquid and some of the funds are on base chain. And I had to organize to pay out in liquid because we have 5 people left in the survivor pool, and 4 of the 5 agreed to a chop. They wanted to divvy up some of the pool before and play for the rest of it. But the 5th person vetoed it. He said, no, I want to keep playing as is. And so that person, the guy, he got eliminated from the pool. So then it was the remaining 4 people. So I had to spend yesterday, dealing with people calling me Satoshi because someone made a fake story that I was Satoshi. I had to spend the whole day yesterday dealing with that. Also trying to pay out these 4 people who had agreed to a chop. So I said, listen, if you guys are okay with a chop, I'm going to pay you out in liquid LBTC. So you guys got to download a liquid wallet, and they all did. And so I sent them each 10,000 bits or a million sats, however you want to say it, in Bitcoin for a chop, and they all made a liquid wallet. Although one thing that was kind of interesting about using liquid that way is that I was able to tell whether they were using Aqua or Blockstream for their liquid wallet, because the address is different. The way the format of the address is different depending on whether it's an Aqua liquid wallet or if it's a Blockstream Green liquid wallet. And I thought that was interesting, that how I could just tell just by the first few letters what company it's from. So I don't know if that's a flaw in Liquid. I mean, I like that Liquid has confidential transactions, but maybe I shouldn't be able to know, the sender shouldn't be able to know which based on the format, which product you're using. But yeah, that's what I was dealing with yesterday, and so I'm glad. I'm happy for the 4 people that are 10,000 bits or a million sats richer for playing in the pool.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. They must have like a different address type then that they're using. And I wasn't aware that Liquid had different address types as far as
the Aqua liquid wallet begins with a capital V, and the Blockstream liquid begins with a lowercase L. So I thought that was a little interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna look at that up. But I mean, I definitely recommend people. I prefer Aqua Wallet just because I like the Lightning integration right in there. and it just works great. I mean, there's really nothing more to say about it. It just works, and that's kind of the joy about it, especially when it comes to new Bitcoin stuff. And Liquid is great with just the fees, and like you said, like it's just easy to use, and the fees, and there's confidential transactions, which adds some privacy to it. So definitely check out Aqua Wallet too if you guys are listening and you're curious about Liquid Bitcoin. But we are at the top of the hour now, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. I appreciate all you guys coming and speaking. Make sure you give us all a follow. Stay in tune with when we run the spaces. We're doing them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we're all part of Bitcoin Mentor. So if you go to bitcoinmentor.io, you can find us. You can email us and book a free session and just get to know how we can help you and what you need help with on your Bitcoin journey. We can do anything from helping you buy Bitcoin, learning about Bitcoin, running a node, all that good stuff. And until we talk next time, hope you all have a good day, and we'll see you on Friday. Take care, guys.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Adios. See ya.